I'm bored. Let's read a book. Oh! Once again, I watched the sunrise and the early morning unfold from my balcony in Kyphrian. I stood alone in the early morning. This time, this winter sun was chill. The cold refreshed me as the brisk wind whipped up from the city, bringing the odor of fresh baked bread, as well as the odor of goats. Somehow, the goats didn't bother me so much anymore. But that might have been the result of an 8 days' worth of meals centering on roasted, stewed, braised, and baked goat, presenting with equally diverse spices and side dishes by the Autarch's chef. At least the breakfast rolls I had brought up from the mess, staying in the guard mess for any length of time, created a profound and drawn-out silence as every single guard seemed to look at me contained no goat meat. My balcony was the one next to Crystal's, with an iron grille-work doorway between the two. Though there was no lock, I had not opened the door since I had yet to see Crystal. The sub-commander had not been in Kyphrian when we had returned, but instead she had used the disruption I had created to destroy the remainder of the prefect's border force. Without the backing of Chaos, the young Gallian troops were no match for the finest, or even for the better local outliers. I had hoped that the talkative Shervin had managed to weather the action, though I was certain that I was ready for a conversation with him any time soon. Whether I was really ready for another conversation, the one with Crystal, was another question. Like me, she wasn't the same person who had left Recluse. Like me, she had forged herself into her own fires into a different kind of steel. I had no doubts that, even with the backstaff in my hand, her blade would have proven superior. Then again, no one was a match for Crystal there, except perhaps Farrell, and I wondered about that. Justin had taken Tamara under his wing, as I had hoped, and she had begun to respond. I had only seen them from a distance, but the Grey Wizard had himself another apprentice. Might do them both good. Thrap. I wanted to ignore the knock on the door, but did not. Instead, walking back inside into the iron-bound red oak door. The order arrayed on the other side could not have been one person. I lifted the latch. Justin stood there. May I come in? Be my guest. I stepped back, aware that the Grey Wizard had the slightest hint of wanness around him. All the bowing and scraping was already getting to me. And it had been barely 8 days since I had stumbled from the ruins of Antonin's castle. You'd have thought that I had done something great, like leveling a few mountains, or even crafting the most beautiful chest ever seen in Kyphros. Bravado, luck, and applying whatever skill I had was what I had done. Not quite like the effort to do a chest or a table perfectly, though they were far more alike than I would have guessed when I had first apprenticed with Uncle Sardet. The other thing I had done, almost unconsciously, was to be honest with myself. Not that I had done really much choice otherwise, but that was another difference between Antonin and me. It had taken a while, most of the ride back to Kyphrian, to figure out the answer to my question. How was I different from Antonin? Even Justin had been different from the White Wizard. Could I have ever imagined Antonin working with smelly sheep? And that was the real sin, the real evil of White Wizards. Pride. The conceit that they would impose their will on the world. Without even mentioning it, Justin had made his point with the smelly sheep of Montegrin. And I hadn't realized that I had learned. May I come in? He repeated. Oh, sorry, he reminded me of something. I moved aside. Justin stepped inside. I gestured toward the balcony. Click. I shut the door. We walked in silence outside into the chill. Since I didn't feel like being close to him, the granite of the guard buildings was also getting to me. So why does everyone have to skitter out of my way, Uncle Justin? I added. He nodded. Was it that obvious? Probably. I didn't see it until I went after Antonin. I'm still angry as heck at Tolerant and Recluse. At my father, and I was. The idea of being sent out as his penance, so to speak, grated on me. While I could understand now why the answers I had sought were not possible, Recluse had no excuse for the excessive secrecy. Tolerance probably quaking in his sandals. Justin's voice was not quite tongue-in-cheek. I doubt that. He's probably happy to be rid of me. Strangely, although I was angry, I wasn't that angry. And I was less concerned about Recluse than about Kyphros or Gallus. Could I ask how you... Justin's tone was deferential. Luck, bravado, stupidity. The usual ingredients of so-called heroism. Laris. I shrugged. Chaos order balance. Simple enough. I looked bewildered for the first time. Chaos is concentrated anarchy, if you will. Order is diffused by nature. They have to balance. Recluse has gotten stronger by letting Kandar create more chaos. In effect, letting... I was the one to shake my head. You know that. You're the one who pointed it out to me. I stopped as Justin shook his head slowly. I swear you did. But after making Antonin stronger, helping him create more chaos, I didn't have much choice. The Grey Wizard looked even more appalled. That might have been the best word. I tried to explain what he must already have known. Order, except in special circumstances, cannot be concentrated. I'm not talking about reinforcing already ordered people, or sheep, or chairs, but pure order. Chaos can. In effect, because order and chaos must balance, the higher the diffuse order in an area, the greater the potential for chaos. So my efforts to increase order in Gallus just allowed Antonin to create more chaos. Another thought struck me. I suppose that meant the overall decrease in order/chaos energy somewhere else, but I haven't worked that out. Anyway, once I figured the balance and my contribution, I didn't have much choice. I was as guilty as Antonin for the destruction. My guts protested. Not as guilty, I corrected myself, but I helped. Justin shook his head and I ignored the gesture, just wanting to finish answering the question. Anyway, all I did to Antonin was throw a reversed shield around us, to reflect energy away from a small circle as I could hold. He maintained himself by drawing from the chaos forces around. With the shield up, he couldn't draw. At least so long as I could keep him from taking my order energies. I shrugged. Without that energy, he just died. Justin nodded. How many people could build a screen like that? Probably any good order master. I didn't think about it. How many black staffers would break their only defense in front of a white wizard? That was stupid, I guess. I didn't know if it would work, but holding on to it wouldn't have protected me for much longer, and the staff kept getting in the way. Besides, that's what the book said. You're right. But no one else, not since before Friven, had stood face to face with the highest of Chaos Masters and triumphed. Justin gestured out at the town. You wonder why everyone bows and scrapes and won't look at you? That's why. You wonder why Tolerant is quaking in his sandals? Every Chaos Master and Order Master in Western Hemisphere heard Antonin fail. That's fine, except I'm not an Ancient Order Master. I'm even ready for Tamara, annoying me. At least that's real. I'm ready to go back to crafting. That's real too. Justin smiled. You said you couldn't? Right, good old Laris is so smart, and why didn't I at least pick up some of Antonin's ill-gotten loot before I dashed out? I might have 3 gold pennies left in my pouch. That's not even enough for tools. I suspect that the reward the Audarch is about to confer. Another ceremony? I groaned. Having half the city lined up at the gate and waving banners very quietly had been bad enough. Even Yelena had looked at my direction and grinned. Your burden to bear, that's another price for heroism. None of that answered my questions, but then no one else would probably ever answer them. How's Tamara? I changed the subject. Ask her yourself. I'll send her up here shortly. She will annoy you. She told me she would. I let him go. He wasn't about to answer the real questions, not the ones I wasn't about to ask. and that still hadn't changed. So I waited, and waited, and waited, remembering in time that Tamara had never been punctual for anyone. Click, she didn't like knocking either. Those blue china doll eyes, cold as ice, took me in as Tamara stepped in, clothed in dark gray once more, wearing a bright blue scarf, onto the chill and sunlit balcony. Her red hair glinted in the light as she edged up to the railing, then turned to look at me. She was wearing it longer, with matching black combs sweeping it away from her face. "Morning, Laris." "Morning, Tamara." I walked over to the ledge. I was careful out of the habit not to stand too close, either to the railing or to Tamara, and looked out on Kyphrien. As the silence continued, I said nothing, for it was not my turn to speak. A puffy white cloud edged toward the sun, casting a brief shadow across the narrow-walled balcony where we contained a corner of recluse. A corner that needed to be expanded beyond the black walls of the Brotherhood, beyond the black walls of Nyland, and the narrow confines of the High Temple. "I should thank you." Her voice was flat as I had ever heard it. "Don't. The only one who deserves thanks is Justin." Her hand came to her mouth, but she still did not look in my direction. If Justin hadn't given me enough hints and forced me to answer my own questions, neither of us would be here. My guts twisted slightly. "You believe that, or is it just more poor little Laris?" Good old Tamara. I actually grinned. "More poor little Laris, of course. But remember that I did die / having something to do with rescue you." Do you really expect me to fall at your feet and be eternally grateful, to mirror your great shining light?" Kept grinning. She sounded like the Tamara I recalled. "Well, eternal gratitude would be nice. You're still impossible. Only sometimes. The rest of the time I look for perfection." She didn't answer for a long time. Finally she said, "I meant what I said about not falling at your feet. I know that. You want to get out your staff and thrash me soundly again." "I can't do that. You broke your staff." Then her voice dropped. "We'd fight too much, and if we didn't, I'd hate you, and if we did, you'd hate me." She was right, but that was one of the answers I had figured out already. One of the few. There were the hills south of Kyphrien, not all that far away, with water and trees, even some of the right kinds of trees. "You're right. I realized you were right back when we talked on the ship. I just wasn't bright enough to understand. Now it may be too late." "What are you going to do?" She ignored my unspoken real question. "I have an idea, but I don't know if the sub-commander of Kyphros would be interested in a mere woodworker who occasionally dabbles in order." For once Tamara looked surprised, almost foolish. "We're having him build a house on a hill not too far from our place of business." Her mouth opened a shade wider. "We're having a redhead who I regard as a sister come visit occasionally." For a time, but only a time, she was speechless. "You're still impossible. You honestly think..." "No, but I can hope." I left her there when I saw green leathers on the adjoining balcony. Green leathers, black hair, and black eyes. The sub-commander unlatched the doorway, and I watched her walk onto the balcony. "You were successful, I hear." The music was still there, linked within the order she had found. "So were you, I understand." She looked over my shoulder. "How's Tamara?" "Annoying as ever, thanks to Justin." "Give him a heck, Crystal," called Tamara before leaving my balcony. "She does seem recovered." Crystal's lips turned up at the corners for a moment. We stood still, looking at each other over at arm's length, or more. "Recovered enough," I answered, wondering why I was dancing around all the things I wanted to say. "Enough." In the end, I stepped forward and took her hands. And like Tamara would have hoped, she took them back, walking to the railing and look out on the city. "You may think you have your answers, but did you ask me?" My stomach turned. Why was I always doing the same thing, assuming I knew what was best for the women I cared for? No, I apologized, highest sub-commander, for possibly thinking that the affections of a woodworker who dabbles in order could possibly be of interest to you. I swallowed, looked down, wondering how I could soon get the heck out of Kyphrian. Except I needed to reward the Autarch might offer. You're still doing it. Doing what? You won't ask anything of anyone. You may want answers, but you never ask for help. There's a difference. I shrugged. There wasn't much to say. I looked at her short and graying dark hair. Although I knew enough to keep her young, just as my father and my mother, at the broader shoulders that carried half the weight of Kyphos on them, and shook my head. Crystal looked vaguely amused. Just a moment. I've worn this darn sword straight for the past 5 days. She unbuckled the belt and laid both sword and belt on the table. Darn sword? I asked. Not any longer, it's ordered. Stop assuming things. She stepped around the table. What? Like whether I wouldn't miss this or that. I am. Always have been. Been what? It was another stupid question, but it finally didn't matter. This time her hands didn't stop at my fingertips, nor mine at hers. We couldn't say anything anymore. Even the gusts of the full winter didn't bother us. Then again, we didn't stay on the balcony long, and she had already barred the door. Someone knocked, of course, but that was later. Much later. Goodbye.